The month of April was marked by lots of new blossoming, and I'm not just talking about on flowers and trees. Weather radar displays also burst forth with new information, not all of it meteorological. I'm referring to the impact that our fine feathered friends have on radar imagery. Now, to see why there's an issue, let's compare the radar reflectivity of a bird, which might be 50 millimeters in diameter, that's about 2 inches wide, with that of a raindrop, which might only be 2 millimeters across. The amount of the radar beam reflected by a target is very sensitive to the size of that target. In fact, it depends on the diameter raised to the 6th power. Now, when you do the math, and we always do for you here on Weather World, that's a huge difference between the reflectivity of a bird and that of a raindrop. So even though raindrops in flight tend to be much more concentrated than birds in flight, the size difference makes up for it. Birds are mainly a problem on radar during migration season, so mid-autumn as well as mid-spring. They travel mainly at night, roughly from an hour after sunset to an hour before sunrise, when there are fewer predators and the birds can use celestial navigation. The weather does play a role in the migration patterns. For example, in spring, the best conditions for heading north occur ahead of a storm on the backside of a departing area of high pressure, where southerly winds prevail. In fact, the weather map this past Sunday evening provided a good case. Here's the radar from 9 p.m. Eastern Time. A front was producing some showers in the Midwest while high pressure controlled the east. So southerly breezes dominated the zone from Texas and the lower Mississippi Valley into the Great Lakes. Now here's the radar 2 hours later after the sun had set. You can still see the rain with the front, but now there's been an explosion of blobs of low reflectivity. These mainly light blues here, around all the radar in the corridor dominated by those southerly winds. This isn't rain, but rather mainly birds taking advantage of the tailwind. Here's more evidence using a close-up from the radar in eastern Iowa at that time. The echoes on the upper left, that's that approaching front. The rest of this is not precipitation. Now let's switch on over to velocity mode, which shows the speed of movement of the targets with respect to the radar. Reds, oranges, and yellows mean the targets are moving away from the radar, and the radar's in the middle here. So these targets up here are moving north. The purples, blues, and greens mean that targets are moving toward the radar. So these targets down here are also moving north. And the speeds represented by these colors are too high for this to just be, say, dust blowing in the wind. So this is consistent with our bird theory. Now let's go back to the national view. This is later Sunday night, a couple hours before sunrise. You still see plenty of those blobs of reflectivity in this corridor of southerly winds. But now here's an hour after sunrise Monday morning. The radar is much cleaner, as the birds are now mainly roosting and resting. I should mention that the radar products I showed here are raw, unprocessed images that you can get right off the National Weather Service website. The radar images we show you on Weather World have been further filtered, and for the most part, the birds have been removed. Fred is back next with the extended forecast.